Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tackling what is honestly a deeply frustrating phase of language learning. We're looking at the exact mechanics of breaking out of basic, foundational English and finally crossing the bridge to intermediate fluency. If you've been putting in the work but just feel stuck, well, this explainer has exactly the insights you need.
Okay, let's dive into this. You've conquered the A1 basics. Remember that feeling? Every time you learned 20 new words, you felt like an absolute giant. Everything was brand new. Everything was exciting. But now you're at the A2 level. And suddenly it feels like you're just standing in the exact same place day after day, even though you're studying just as hard. So what's actually going on here?
Well, this feeling of absolute stagnation leads to some heavy frustrations. It frequently results in learners saying things exactly like this quote from the source material. English is too difficult, I will never be B1. Sounds familiar, right? But here is the really surprising truth. You are not failing, not at all. You're just in a totally normal phase where you are basically building a bigger engine for your brain. So the absolutely crucial thing to remember is that this intermediate plateau is completely normal. Think of it like a long, flat road right after climbing a huge hill. The big trap here is thinking, oh, I just need to do more of what got me to A2. You don't. Escaping this requires a total shift in your strategy if you actually want to cross that bridge from basic to intermediate. Think about it like this. At the A2 level, you're essentially carrying around this tiny little toolbox. You use really simple, direct words just to fix small, immediate problems. But the target for B1 is entirely different. You're aiming to become a fully independent user. We're talking about someone who can literally survive alone in an English-speaking country. You aren't just stating isolated facts anymore. You're explaining your opinions, your ideas, and your dreams. And the fundamental difference in everyday speech really comes down to one thing: flow. An A2 speaker gives you a simple list of facts, right? I go to work, I like tea. It's kind of robotic. But a B1 speaker? They tell a connected story. I prefer tea because it makes me feel calm when I am stressed at work. See the difference? The B1 level is all about that connection.
Now, to get to that flowing, story-like level, we've got to stop building our sentences brick by brick with single, isolated words. Instead, we have to start using what are called collocations. Basically, these are natural word partnerships. Think of them like pre-made walls for your English house. When you drop them into your sentences, your speech automatically, and I mean instantly, becomes faster and just so much smoother.
Using these combinations completely shifts how you sound. Look, if you say, make a walk or strong rain, yeah, people are going to understand you, sure, but you're going to sound incredibly basic. By simply shifting to the natural collocations, saying, take a walk and heavy rain, bam, you instantly sound like a smooth, capable B1 speaker. It's a real game changer. All right, once you've got those pre-made walls, you have to actually link them together. And the bridge to B1 is literally paved with connectors. You can upgrade your speech every single day by picking just one specific B1 connector to practice. Words like so that, even though, or since. The whole goal here is to extend your standard sentences with an extra piece of information, which taps into what the source material calls the power of 3. By actively using those connectors, your speaking evolves dramatically. I mean, A2 speakers communicate in what kind of sounds like a choppy telegram. I went home, I ate. But a B1 speaker delivers a beautifully flowing paragraph. Yesterday, I went home early because desita. This extended paragraph-style speaking is exactly what makes you sound professional, nuanced, and deep. Now, of course, when you're actually practicing this extended paragraph speaking, you're gonna forget words. It happens to everyone. And that is exactly where this next concept comes in: circumlocution. Don't freeze up. Don't sit there agonizing over perfect grammar or hunting for one specific noun. Actually, scratch perfection entirely. Just use this skill to talk around the word you don't know, keeping the actual flow of the conversation moving. At this stage, flow is far, far more important than perfection. Okay, but to actually fuel this entirely new speaking style, a casual 15-minute daily study habit, yeah, that simply won't cut it anymore. You must immerse yourself in what the source calls an input flood. You literally need to drown your brain in slightly challenging English for at least 1 to 2 hours every single day. If you're understanding 100% of what you hear, you aren't growing, period. I know. Let's dive into how you actually manage this daily routine, because 2 hours sounds completely overwhelming. But here's the secret. You don't need all that time at once. You just need to utilize small daily moments. Try 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes while you're out taking a walk, and maybe 30 minutes right before bed. This consistent, steady flood is exactly how your brain naturally maps B1 structures completely automatically.
And a major part of that daily flood absolutely needs to be reading. The source specifically recommends graded readers. These are books perfectly tailored to your current level. Reading acts as this incredible silent teacher. It lets your brain see patterns, like, say, the past continuous working with the past simple, literally thousands of times. You just absorb the grammar completely naturally without ever having to sit down and agonize over a strict rulebook.
But here's the catch. Reading and listening, those only build passive knowledge. To truly cross the bridge, you must convert all that into active power. And writing is the absolute perfect laboratory for this. Writing a daily life journal is essentially just slow speaking. It gives you the necessary time to actually think, forcing you to utilize the connectors and grammar you've absorbed to express not just what happened, but how you actually felt about it. Now, as for your listening inputs, it is officially time to leave the protective cage of slow, teacher-led English. You've got to step into what the source describes as the cold shower of semi-natural podcasts and real-world interviews. Look, at first, it's going to feel way too fast and honestly pretty overwhelming. But if you stick it out and stay in the water, your adaptable brain will rapidly adjust to real-world hearing speed. Let's put this into perspective. Consider the number 2000. This actually represents the massive passive vocabulary most A2 learners already possess. You probably recognize and understand this many words right now when you're reading or listening to that input flood. But, tragically, 500, that is the tiny, tiny fraction of those 2,000 words that A2 learners actively use when they actually open their mouths to speak. There's just this massive gap between the words you know and the words you actually use. So the absolutely crucial point here is that crossing the bridge isn't always about hunting down brand new flashcards to memorize. It's really about activation. It's about challenging yourself to utilize the passive vocabulary you already have in new specific ways. This is exactly how you increase your charisma and add real, subtle shades of meaning to your everyday thoughts. Let me show you how this activation works in practice. Swap out those lazy, boring A2 words like good and bad. Force yourself to use the charismatic B1 words you already know passively, words like excellent, pleasant, disappointing, or unpleasant. It seems like a minor thing, but this simple shift instantly shows the world your depth and completely changes how your communication is received. Ultimately, escaping this plateau all culminates in a profound psychological shift. You really have to stop being an A2 tourist, someone who just waits around for a teacher to point things out. You must become a B1 resident. A resident actively explores, asks why, and actually builds a professional and personal life in English. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to remember that the frustration of the intermediate plateau is actually a sign of your growth, not a sign of failure. The bridge to B1 is built with collocations, input floods, and active application. And all of this leaves you with one final, essential question to ask yourself today. Are you going to stay a tourist, or are you ready to finally cross the bridge and build your new life as a resident?